Welcome to the Regional Health Solutions podcast, powered by Statum.
We're your hosts, William Munt and Jaden Frame.
Hello and welcome back to the Regional Health Solutions podcast. You're here with Will Munt and Jaden Frame. Well, we're into episode 5 of season 2, and today's guest is Anne Livingstone. Anne's CV and breadth of experience is enormous, so bear with me as I outline this. She's the Executive Director of Global Community Resourcing, which is an Australian-based consultancy that spent nearly 2 decades working at the intersection of primary healthcare, innovation and community co-design. She's got over 40 years of experience across health and community services sector with a career that spans service delivery, large-scale reform, national policy, global innovation. She's led and contributed to more than 100 projects which have been focused on redesigning care models and implementing technology in ways that work for communities, not just system redesign. Anne's also played a role in some of the most significant shifts we've seen in aged care and digital health in Australia, including early work on the development of the National Star Rating System. She's represented Australia internationally for more than 15 years across ISO, IEC and APEC, contributing to the standards in ageing, smart technology and inclusive communities. She's also chair of the National Aged and Community Care Roundtable for Forgotten Australians, with work that's been recognised both nationally and internationally. This is a group that's driving reform for people who have experienced institutional or out-of-home care. Her organisation's work spans aged care, disability, palliative care, community health, a strong focus on place-based collaboration and the thoughtful co-designed use of technology to improve outcomes in our regional and remote communities. This is a very in-depth conversation, and we cover a range of topics, including the disconnect between policy design and what is community reality, practical examples of co-designed service models, the evolving role of technology in aged care and community health, the structural challenges facing our regional and remote systems, along with a number of related themes that emerge throughout this conversation. We're excited to bring you Anne Livingstone. We are here with Anne Livingstone. Anne, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And you've got an incredible profile and an equally incredible, I would say, list of achievements. And hopefully we've been able to do justice to that in the introduction just now. But for the listener who's meeting you for the first time, how would you summarise your path to date?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm just really passionate about accessible primary healthcare and really interested in how people can live well in their own communities for as long as they can. It's pretty simple agenda. I don't have a complicated agenda. And I'm very interested in how communities can be as inclusive as possible, but also the role that innovation plays, that change is inevitable. We've got technological revolutions happening all the time. And how does that get to improve the quality of life, basically, for individuals?
I'm gonna go a step further with that because I love that answer. You've got so much experience. You've worked across policy, you've worked across innovation, and you just touched on that. You've worked across frontline service design for decades. And I'm going to cut to the meaty part almost of the conversation here, which you talk about accessible primary healthcare. So you may frame this answer through the primary healthcare lens, but what do you think the sector is currently getting right and still getting wrong today, whether it's primary health or it's aged care or it's the acute sector? What's your opinion?
Well, we only work, I guess to clarify, we only work within the non-acute sector. So our work spans across palliative care, aged care, disability, but just people who are trying to capitalise on individual responsive healthcare services for themselves and for their communities. What's right? What's wrong at the minute? I guess what we're seeing is just the burden of reform is really getting in the way of good service delivery. People are bogged down in administrative regulation, compliance, and not really looking or having time to really just sit and deliver very good person-centred, responsive care, whatever that care might look like and in whatever form. I think it's a challenge, and think we should acknowledge the burden that providers and workers within those providers are really going through. It is one of the hardest times of a life of service provision, whatever type of service provision you're in. And I often say, reflective of my first 20 years in service delivery land, I'm somewhat glad that I'm not in the coalface. It's a really hard job. So I wanted to, call out and shout out that workforce is our most critical component of delivery of good primary health care. And we're stretching it and stressing it at the moment. And I think we can do that better.
Yeah. So following that theme and leveraging off the stretched workforce, what are some of the innovations that we can call upon to assist and strengthen that service provision? What are you seeing out there?
I think the work we do, Jaden, is we look at where the pain points are, what's repetitive, what's duplicative, what is difficult to achieve, and then is there an innovation, a practice, process change that can happen, or is there a piece of technological kit that can assist? I guess we're seeing the extreme advantage of AI in all of the areas that we use in so many capacities. We're working around issues from assessment to client documentation to service delivery to exiting services. So the whole gambit of how innovation can change there. The possibilities are so many, but the practicalities are difficult, aren't they? Getting a piece of kit and introducing it into a service is one thing. Getting sustainable, impactful outcomes that continue on for individuals is a big thing. And I think, again, that relates to the capacity of workforce to respond to change, but also our policymakers and our funders actually really embracing new approaches to care delivery. And I think that's some of the challenge we've seen over the last 20 years is that sometimes the sector might move faster than the regulation and policy can do. And one of those, I guess, played out in a recent project where we met you, Jaden, our Queensland government-funded Regional Futures project, where we were looking at a number of technologies that could support, and one was air mobility with the delivery of critical supplies during times of emergencies, and particularly being able to tailor-make deliveries to particular critical needs of individuals on island communities. And it's the regulations and the compliance around that really made that approach not viable or sustainable.
Yeah, let's take a backward step, and that's a really good project that I've had visibility over. So, global community resourcing. Can you just tell us about? You're the executive director. How do you use global community resourcing to support these projects and push them forward? Because what you're saying is consistent with a lot of our presenters that the resistance or the resistance for the health industry to change and to adopt new technology is real, and there's reasons for that, but it needs to catch up because it is doing things it's doing 20 years ago that you saw coming, and they're still doing old practices. And yeah, I'm really keen to understand how global community resourcing or resources, how you support that change process and what you do in that entity.
Thank you. Jaden, we've been around now nearly 20 years, coming up next year 20 years. So that's, I think, a pretty good track record for a small Australian-based service. Our founders set us up really with a very dedicated focus to improving quality and impact. And that was as basic as the vision was of primary health care. And that's meant different things over the period of that 20 years. And we really see that we're directly involved in improving quality and impact through business transformation. And whether that's process transformation, service model redesign, workforce redevelopment, but more and more over probably the last 15 years, it is about the impact of technological change on service provision. But at the core, it is the expectations of our customer base, isn't it? Our customers want to be more involved. Individuals who access primary healthcare want more choice and control. They want more quality, but they want the opportunity to really be involved in co-designing and co-creating services, not just from the front of the service, but towards the back end and also governance of services. So a lot of our work's done at that community engagement, individual engagement level. We work pretty much with our lens of Living Lab co-design lens. We're very proud to be long-term participants in the International European Network of Living Labs. We're also founding members of the Australian Living Lab Innovation Network. We worked with a number of key partners a few years back and developed a national framework for the deployment of living labs, particularly in the aged care sector, and that work was funded by the Digital Health CRC. That's an important framework that we use and apply, and we did it recently in the Regional Futures Project at a local level project, but we do that at scale in international projects and national projects that we're involved in. I guess our purpose is really enabling communities to thrive, to age in place, live in place, have a chronic disease and live in your own community. And it is about promoting really high quality evidence and translating that into practice. So we work with a number of universities around strengthening the evidence and using that to build local capacity. I guess we also see that local is best. And so that building that capacity is not just building local services, but building leadership and capacity and resilience of communities to respond to the changing primary healthcare needs of individuals who reside there. And that was really a hallmark of this project that we are undertaking and just about to complete on the Southern Moreton Bay Islands.
Yeah, well, so those people who are out there, just a shout out, if that's of interest and you do want to get connected to global community resourcing, feel free to reach out to us here at Statham and we can pass on Anne's name and details. And it's fascinating stuff that she's doing across a broad spectrum of areas. And looking ahead, you've been doing this for 20 years. Where do you see things in 10 years in regional Australia with healthcare? What's your if you had a crystal ball right now, where do you see it moving towards?
I think even 5 years is hard, Jaden. That's quite a question. I think when you reimagine things, you want to be focused at what you actually want to achieve in the end. And so I guess our mission is around primary healthcare being really a system that is locally led, digitally enabled, and really genuinely equitable. Our work really extends to the most marginalised individuals in our communities, and we see inequality and lack of access as one of the key issues that is seeing individuals and communities thrive or not survive. So it's really those three areas of a system that really is local, connected and person-centred that we would strive. And I think that's I hope it's a 10-year achievable goal. I guess we've seen lots of work towards that here and internationally, and we still don't seem to be able to quite get there, and we've still got people falling through the gaps. I guess that we don't have seamless pathways, so that's a big issue. We don't have seamless pathways for people who live in metro areas, and then you place that the pressures of regional and more isolated areas.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, Ian? And that's around, you talk about it being locally led. 100% agree, and it's what we see when we partner with the more regional and remote areas. Digital enablement, that's probably the thing I want to double down on, is if you had to prioritise, what are the technologies or those innovations, specifically that are actually going to move the needle in the next 3 to 5 years?
I always get asked to name names and pack drills and names of kits. That I never buy into that game. I guess, AI is obviously the one top of the agenda. we're just seeing daily in our own practice how our productivity can be improved by the use of a whole range of AI tools. We've hosted, along with our colleagues at Swinburne University, 2 national conferences on the application of AI in community care specifically. The opportunities are fascinating and fundamental. The understanding of the applications, also the risks and what the consumer engagement strategies need to be, there needs a lot more work. So I guess in our recent projects too, I'm always passionate about smart home technologies, broad brush approach to those technologies, anything from environmental monitoring to falls prediction and detection to predicting declining chronic disease. Along with some colleagues that Jade and I have been involved in smart home research for a couple of decades now. And over the time, the technology's matured, yes, but the want and ability to uptake these technologies hasn't. And I think we're seeing so much opportunity and potential, particularly when you look at the chronic waiting lists we have for services. So we're not talking just about people in receiving services at the moment, but people who are waiting for extreme amount of time on our wait list to get any services, and indeed dying while they're on that waiting list. We see that the opportunity of the assessment opportunities of smart home technologies are really very sophisticated now. And I call out to colleagues, Talius and others who are doing great work in analytics and prediction around people's current conditions and what sort of services they need. You couple that with the fact that at the moment, our assessment system, for example, in aged care, has waiting lists beyond belief. And really, it's a national shame that we have those waiting lists just to get an assessment for a service. In the same breath, we've got smart home technologies that are reliable and tested and evidence-based that could be really providing a great ability to assist the stress system in providing comprehensive assessments. And we're not just talking an assessment where someone walks in for an hour and does a stock standard static assessment. We're talking about really dynamic 24-hour, 7 days a week assessment. And we hope to put some proposals together soon in partnership with yourselves that where new technologies or existing and emerging technologies can assist with really triaging the most critical people on waiting lists up to service delivery level.
You've led into you've partly answered the next question I was going to ask. Do you see any regions at the moment that are doing it really, really well and are that guiding star where everyone can follow? Or do you think that we need to establish it like the proposal you've just discussed, so create that North Star where people can follow? Is there anyone doing it, or does that best practice need to be created?
I guess there's a couple of things, Jaden, here. There are some glowing examples of good practice around the ridges, but they're isolated. There's not an opportunity for any or all of those to be mainstreamed. And I guess that's where you call out maybe a good provider who's investing in innovation and really having a responsive result for their client group. But there's very few mechanisms in which you can get traction and get scale and get mainstreaming. I'm doing a similar sort of discussion with a colleague from the UK on this very issue. He's been involved in a project in Europe called Progressive that is trying to move pilots to have sustainable outcomes where they've shown evidence to do that. It's a challenge about investing in pilots, investing in smaller projects, and then leaving them on the shelf is one thing, but also just trying to get traction the attention of policymakers. I've seen some of the best examples of reform, some of those particularly in smart homes. And again, I'll refer to the small trial on some Moreton Islands. Every client in that trial who's had smart home equipment has reported significant benefits from that. We can see that it's lowered the pressure on the health system, it's lowered the pressure on families, but getting traction to mainstream that is very difficult, even when those people might have funding that could be flexible enough to respond to the needs of incorporating that technology at higher levels. I also think the other part of that equation is workforce readiness. We've got an ageing healthcare workforce in itself. We've got to encourage better service model design that really thinks about technology being incorporated at the forefront of service delivery, not as a tag-on or as an ad hoc. And we've got to really lay digital inclusion as a foundation preparation for community members and individuals who access primary health care, not just as an afterthought. So you don't want to give a piece of kit to an individual who doesn't know how to turn it on, use it. So I guess we're also seeing technologies being much more affordable and user-friendly and normalised. So we really should be embracing that in the delivery of care.
Yeah. And just to call out to those other people who are doing pilots and trials across the country and regional, if you do want to reach out to Statham, and this is the purpose of the podcast, is to highlight great things that are happening in our regions and in our listener base, which are politicians, decision makers, CEOs of HHSs. They are listening to us. So if you do want to promote your pilot and try to get in front of the right people to make those or make that sustainability decision on your pilot, please reach out to us because we'd love to hear from you.
Can I just paraphrase maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes and make sure I understand maybe where we've just navigated across? That technology you believe exists, that AI, predictive analytics, where we could arguably compress assessment times, right? But one of the barriers is that governance and policy catch up whilst trying to find funding, I suppose, for pilots, and it's chicken and egg. You need the evidence to suggest that it works. However, it's innovative and it's new, so you don't have the runs on the board to demonstrate that it works. So to get funding for something becomes a little bit more difficult. Probably where I'm going with that is, can you see any sort of, this is innovation for the funding model now, innovation for the funding model for innovation. Is there a way that we can incentivize innovation and make it not as cost prohibitive and try and offset some of the latter costs of healthcare by encouraging facilities and organisations to have that as part of their strategy?
I guess we've had attempts over time to have national policy programs that incentivise different industries to innovate. I was involved early in the piece around the potential to develop an enabling technology strategy for Australia for aged care. We see other countries that are really focused on a national policy around innovation around certain industries, and we see those industries thrive and be better service deliverers. We see that in mining and other industries. I think we need a national framework. I do think we need incentive programs. We do have some industry programs that have over time attempted to highlight the needs for policy reform and funding reform. We've seen them not really matched post-royal commissions into service sectors. We've really seen that we've got a lot of improvement required in traditional models of care, which gets in the way of then people thinking more about innovative models of care. And then I think we need to have a mindset where we have integration of traditional models of care with more innovative. And I think that's the thing. You have to do business as usual and innovate. So how do you do that in an integrated way? Shouldn't be at the cost of one or the other. But we do need some leadership here. We need policy leadership. We need industry leadership. And at a local level, I think I see every day local services really providing some leadership, some thought leadership, but rolling up their sleeves and in practice innovating. But then it's that mainstreaming and traction afterwards that's always the issue. And our final part of our Regional Futures project is just looking at that issue of mainstreaming sustainability. And it's a challenge. It's really a challenge because, the best of a pilot stops and then it doesn't get taken up.
Yeah. And that's, I'll roll two questions in here together. And collaboration is the key. Like, it is the key. How do you see partnerships between government, private providers and community evolving over the next decade? And if there's one message you can give to these people, all our listeners, how do they get that to happen?
Our very best work, Jaden, is in collaboration, in partnership. We never do any work alone, and I don't think in the 20 years we've ever done projects without a collaborative approach. And again, I reflect on the Regional Futures program. I think it was an outstanding example of private and public partnerships along with community partnerships making things happen. And that had some unique partnerships in terms of the university sector, but more importantly, the private health sector and the non-government sector, and those who are really attempting to raise the needs of isolated and marginalised communities up on the list, alongside those who are more in the innovation space, seeing the gaps and seeing the potential. But I see collaboration can't just be at the point of a project formation, but it is from consultation to co-governance of some of the things that are needed. And I don't think any place-based partnership models can actually work without a really focused lens on the collaborations you need to bring to the table, how you need to actually engage in different ways with those different partners, and how you can actually really integrate those variety of systems that partners might come into or bring to the table. And most of all, we need funders and policymakers at the table. And I shout out to some of the government departments we work at that are really interested at local, state and federal levels of co-designing a future really comprehensively with non-profit and the private sector. And we need more of that in the framework of changes to primary health care.
I love you referencing place-based. I really do believe that any solution needs to be anchored to the local entity and tying into the why of Statham, improving the healthcare industry improves the livability of a region, because health underpins the livability of any region, and without it, it's the sustainability of a region. It really is the linchpin. And we really, really do appreciate the work you do, and you are a connector, and you bring a lot of people together to get things happening across private, public, government. So really appreciate the work you've done over the last 20 years, and really excited to see where things go in the next 10 to 20. And looking forward to watching this space. Thank you.
It's been fascinating listening to you speak. I've got my wheels turning. I've got one last question though.
Oh, look!
If you had the ear, Anne, hypothetically, of every pundit, every stakeholder who has a hand on the wheel in the health and aged care industry, what's the one message that you'd leave?
I guess it's that in respect to regional health, just don't consider it as a scaled-down version of our metro colleagues. That it requires really thought to be deliberately designed, it to be place-based and truly place-based, a system that is built around people, communities and connection. And I think it's those, if you put that lens on it from the start, it's not hard to fit policy and funding around that. But I think we lose sight of really the potential and the importance of locally led and co-designed. It's a big tick item. but the need to integrate. We talk about integration. Do we really do it? I think we have a bit of a play at integrated services, but we never in reality get there because I think some of the local impact is not considered. Workforce is a big issue. We've got to really sustain rural and regional workforces in ways that really acknowledge that if we don't have sustainable place-based workforces, we don't have a primary healthcare system.
And is there anything else you'd like to cover off, or any points that you want to talk about before we say thank you very much?
I think probably reflect on co-design and inclusion. So we can only have the primary healthcare system that really reflects the needs of the most disadvantaged in our community if we don't have them at the table designing and co-creating. We do really have to, I think we're in a critical time at the minute with everything happening. The strengths of regional communities needs to be acknowledged, but their resilience, the development of better ways to increase resilience needs to be maintained and invested in. And we do really need some leadership. I do think we've got a changing landscape of decision makers and people at the top of organisations. We should really be investing in the next trench of leadership to ensure that we've got services that are really fit for service and that really are innovative and adaptive for the changing needs of communities and individuals in regional and rural Australia.
It's a good message. That idea of locally led, the digital enablement, the co-design, the powerful thing for me was not treating rural just as a scaled down version of metro, that it's got its own nuances and things that need careful consideration. And probably the big thing as well, I don't know if it was said in these exact words, but right at the front end is those pilots that are actually putting their money where their mouth is and showing demonstrable outcomes, not letting funding and policy being the barrier to getting the runs on the board and getting the outcomes. The outcomes are actually the data and the evidence that this works, which, again, you referenced Tallius is what we're seeing. And thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time as well. And look forward to listening to some other of your podcasts over the weekend. Thank you.
Stay connected with the conversation about enhancing livability through sustainable healthcare solutions for regional Australia. Visit statum.com.au/podcast to learn more, connect with us and join the movement towards a healthier future for our regional communities.